So this is the Hamilton Khaki 36mm mechanical, finally. Everything I've read and researched about this, there's a lot that has been missed. Fascinating facts and history behind the 250 that the watch media has neglected to cover. What do you expect? So today we're going to ask the question, is this the best new watch of 2026, or is it too little too late? Don't forget to add your thoughts. Now, if you want to support free, independent, hands-on reviews, no AI scripted fakery, no faceless AI voiceovers, just real opinions from an enthusiast for my fellow enthusiasts, then don't forget to click like, very important indeed. Without further ado, let's roll the intro. Right, I'll do a very quick wristwatch check wearing this gorgeous solid gold Longines, beautiful Art Deco case from the 1950s. Strangely, I've done a whole video. This is a truly fascinating horological story, the movement, the design, everything. And it comes on its own strap. I've nicknamed it the Johnny Walker because of that at an angle solid gold loop there for the strap. Just amazing, never seen anything quite like it. And of course, it being burgundy, I've matched it with my grandfather's signet ring, you know how we do, and a little bit to match the shirt, so Having previously covered the history of Hamilton's unparalleled military lineage in several videos, I highly recommend that you watch this particular episode before proceeding so you can fully contextualize this review. So without repeating myself ad nauseum, today's watch is directly inspired by the exceptionally rare FAPD reference 5101 Type 1 Navigator's watch, and astonishingly, it was only issued for a single month in September of 1970. It was specially issued to the Air Force navigators and intentionally larger than the previous and most famed 35mm mil-spec GGW113 that I also owned at one point, which was famously contracted to the battlefield from 1967 throughout the Vietnam War and into the late 1980s. The decision to supply the FAPD to aircrew is unknown, but at the time of its issuing, it coincided with a major shift of focus for the United States Air Force, and thus revealing the most likely reasons.
50 years ago was a time when civil rights were legal, but the resistance was lethal. A time of war and body counts and assassinations.
With the Vietnam War being the major issue during the 1968 presidential election, it was subsequently won by Richard Nixon, who vociferously claimed to have a secret plan to end the war.
To protect our men who are in Vietnam and to guarantee the continued success of our withdrawal and Vietnamization programs, I have concluded that the time has come for action.
By 1970, the war had expanded into Cambodia in a vain attempt to stem the flow of forces from Viet Cong sanctuary bases and supply lines. And before that, the Vietnamization policy was enacted in late 1969 by the Nixon administration. This strategy was aimed at systematically reducing US involvement by expanding, equipping, and training the South Vietnamese Armed Forces, or ARVN. As a result, in 1970, as South Vietnamese Air Force capabilities grew, the United States Air Force initialized the start of its own withdrawal, along with reprioritizing its missions. Inside South Vietnam, enemy activity remained relatively low compared to the most bloodiest years following the Tet Offensive in 1968. So the US Air Force flew more than 48,000 targeted sorties, mostly against North Vietnamese forces that had infiltrated into South Vietnam. This also coincided with a change in Air Force tactics regarding bombers and jets now being permitted to attack targets even closer to friendly forces.
The B-52s would be featured in the last big chapter of the Vietnam Air War. President Nixon resumed heavy bombing of North Vietnam. sending B-52s for the first time over Hanoi and its port of Haiphong. He also ordered the mining of Haiphong Harbor. The bombing was halted a few months later when peace talks appeared to be making progress.
And simultaneously, directly on Nixon's orders and in accordance with the deeply Machiavellian method known as the Mad Men theory, the deployment of B-52s equipped with nuclear bombs in numerous show-of-force operations also started during this period along the border. And nothing complements the smell of napalm or possibly nukes in the morning like a good navigational watch to make sure it all happens on time. Lest we forget, the issuing of quartz or digital watches was still many years away, and so a quick batch of already proven hammies manufactured by a more than capable Hamilton was the best and trusted choice for the US DoD. So let's get the big, giant war elephant in the room out of the way first, shall we? Yes, it's finally 36 millimeters. A lot of people have been asking for this. Yeah, absolutely fantastic. Lug to lug could have been a smidgen smaller. We do have quite long lugs there, but other than that, absolutely outstanding. In terms of how it wears, well, wonderfully so. Interestingly, not anything like an Explorer, mainly due to these lugs here. If I pull in my little Tudor day date there, this actually has an oyster case which is pretty much identical to my wife's Datejust and very similar to the Explorer. You can clearly see that the lug to lug is significantly longer. Now, I don't typically talk about the packaging that watches come in, but I have to say it was absolutely exceptional. I love the little canvas pouch. It has the same effect as Wagner has on Woody Allen. If you remember the famous line, I can't listen to Wagner anymore because he gets the urge to conquer Poland. This certainly has that militaristic vibe, typically under $1,000. A watch strap, they're always an afterthought. But wow, this leather, this distressed affair here, sublime. It's wonderfully supple, beautifully stitched, very strong, luxuriously comfortable. Like I always say, are you listening, Seiko? Standard buckle, which is done in a nice parkerized finish to reflect the case. The water resistance is 100 meters, despite having a push and pull crown. Pull it out there, you see it's hackable. We'll return to the luminescence later, spoilers there. But let's talk movement. Well, this is the H50 mechanical movement with the Nivacron, of course, balance spring. We've got a weekend friendly 80-hour power reserve, so you can wear it Monday to Friday, take it off on Friday, no problem. Now, if we look in a little bit closer, you see that rather stuttery VPH. It's been lowered to 21,600 instead of the 28,800 of the ETA that it's based on, and this has naturally extended the power reserve. 2801-2 was introduced in 1982, so we have a really established history of proven reliability. I have been very critical of the modularization of these entry-level Swatch calibers, as in the past I kind of feared, shall we say, an enshizeification of watches for profit. But unlike the Tissot plastic parts scandal, there is none of that, thankfully. It's all kosher, and also I do feel it fits the martial context. The movement in this case, literally and figuratively, suits large-scale industrial craft. Also, we should mention, of course, it's internationally serviceable. You avoid any of the risk that comes with, the micro brands, which I do feel is not talked about here today. Gone tomorrow serviceability risk. I mean, it's a real danger that few address. As I wind it, it feels incredibly solid. You see it's hackable. The quality is excellent, as you see. Accuracy wise, well, this is pleasingly in the single digits, and I don't often hear about any issues. So on the whole, massively reliable. "1970 was not the first time Hamilton produced 36mm cases in their field watches. However, admittedly, the FAPD did debut a unique caliber, the 684, that no other civilian or military models ever utilized again. The initial use of this case was with the legendary GS, or General Service Watches, made on bequest of the British government to supply essential non-military and intelligence personnel during the 1960s, which I am extremely fortunate to currently own myself, with this example being the even rarer 24-hour dial variant. Now, if you want to learn a little bit more about the amazing GS series, check out this deep dive on a watch that most likely would have been the real MOD-approved Bond watch. That is, of course, if 007 was not a fictional character.
It's waterproof, of course.
But of course.
It even had a little bit of special Q-branch styled gadgetry featured, called tropicalized cases. These were specifically designed for the extreme climates of the then far-flung reminiscences of empire, such as extra waterproofing, added anti-magnetism, shock protection, and resistance to a greater temperature variation, resulting in an extra dust cover just underneath the caseback. Thankfully, this has been carried over into this new 2026 release. However, the most important aspect to understand about this new 36mm case is how essentially it's a scaled down version of the modern 38mm or 48mm khaki mechanical case, rather than a strict recreation of the case utilized by the GS during the 60s. If you look at the GS side by side, you can clearly see that the lugs now are slightly thicker, longer and wider tipped than its ancestor. The GS unfortunately has generally been ignored as a field watch, as it features a dial based on Hamilton's 6B spec, which was originally created for the Royal Air Force, aka the poor man's Mark 11, due to its strong resemblance to the far more expensive IWC or JLC pilots watches. However, it was intended as a multi-purpose field or dagger certifiable watch through and through. And interestingly, once again, all the surface level videos on this watch have failed to notice the significance of Hamilton signing the branding with an italicized script, just like my GS, and not the standard bold of all the other previous khaki mechanicals. Coincidence? Far from it. Hamilton cleverly included this as a respectful design nod to the overlooked history of the GS. The original FAPD, being a sterile dial, confirms this, as the GS was branded, because of course it was intended for intelligence officers in civilian attire. But aside from the intended wearers and overall aesthetics, there's also another big fundamental difference between these two watches. The FAPD being in a parkerized finish to reduce reflections in the field, and thus giving away a position to the enemy, or rather in this pilot-specific scenario, accidentally blinding them when they are performing a critical maneuver. Whereas the GS was set up more akin to your typical Bondian explorer, with a confluence of polished and directional brushing, again to try and pass it off as a civilian watch, which, let's be honest, is a disguise that utterly fails, as both of them scream military like a gunnery Sergeant Hartman after 5 espressos.
You're so ugly you could be a modern art masterpiece.
Lastly, the engraving on the back is a charming touch, mimicking the mill specification blurb of old. Simple, logical, but intelligently designed and effective. I'm 99% sure that the original FAPD used the GS case. And what confirms this for me, they used dials from the old 35mm and then put it in the 36mm GS case. I think that's what happened. I think they had surplus cases left over, because whenever you make a watch, and I speak from experience, you always make more in case you need to replace them in servicing. It varies from brand to brand, but typically it's a rule of about 10%. You make 10% extra. For a small batch like the FAPD that was only issued for 1 month, they simply took the 35mm dial and they put it in. And this explains why there's that little bit of extra space at the edge or the periphery of the dial. What's fascinating is they've actually done this again on the new recreation. Obviously the GS had different handset, different dial, etc. So let's discuss the negatives. Well, first of all, the fixed spring bars. While it absolutely is in keeping with the spirit of the original and basically kills any risk of a spring bar failure, it does limit strap pairings. The acrylic box-shaped crystal is truly a ballsy move, I have to say. The advantages are that, well, mainly it recreates that vintage charm, especially at that angle. Look, if you see what I mean. You just cannot replicate that with the coldness of sapphire, but obviously, I can already see the comments. Why isn't it sapphire? It's not actually any cheaper to do it this way. A lot of people don't know that. It's not a cost-cutting thing. It actually reminds me of my friends at Laurier. If you recall the Safari, I think it was 5, 6, possibly even more years ago when we started working on this and released it, we used acrylic there. Polywatch is your friend, guys. It's not the end of the world. And in a military context, it actually makes more sense because typically plexiglass or acrylic crystals, they provide an advantage. They will crack rather than shatter. Fed up with saying this, but why no loomed numerals? It would have just elevated the orientation to that next level. They've done it in the past and they stopped doing it. Having said that, the Superluminova, this is grade X2, is solid, even though it is rather diminutive. The faux patina, I'm still undecided. Personally, I don't mind it. It's done well. Not like that Omega, the Bond Omega, but anyway. I think actually they should have gone with the pilot dial. The GS is the other way around. It's a field watch with a pilot dial, whereas this is a pilot watch with a field watch dial. But I understand they're keeping faithful to the original. And of course, they're honoring American history, not British history. Another solution for the luminescence is to do what the Brits did and use Flieger style arrow and little markers at the 3, 6 and 9. The Brits are many things, but sono sempre furbi. Another little negative is I feel the crown is a smidgen undersized. I wish they went with the original proportions of the FAPD. If you see there, it's just a little bit easier to grip, to get a purchase on if you need to pop it out and set the time. If you're winding this every day, you've got to get it 1000% right, because this is the point of contact. Now, of course, if you haven't owned a GS or a original FAPD or the Vietnam field watches, you're not going to notice this. I feel like this is just from my experience. This is why real hands-on reviews from fellow owners and enthusiasts matters, because experience only reveals these details. Just a quick regurgitation of a press release is not going to cut it. Another negative for me, and I said this also in the recent 2001 Marina Militare Squale dive watch review, is that there's nothing new here. It's not reinventing the balance wheel. And maybe it shouldn't at this hyper competitive price point. Maybe I'm asking for too much. The biggest negative, and I've got to quote the excellent calibercorner.com, the H50 inside is laser regulated at the ETA factory and not intended to be regulated by a watch owner, which is something I actually do appreciate about the vintage ones. And apparently if there is an issue, they just send them back to the Swatch group for regulation or replacement. I've actually regulated this one myself. The relationship feels a little bit more intimate, shall we say. Now, to go back to the Safari, this was also 36mm, and at the time was a huge gamble because nobody was making small watches like this, especially in the micro brand space. It paid off. It sold out in a couple of days. It was amazing, and it showed there was a demand. More than half a decade later, is it too little too late? Let me know what you think in the comments.
I mean, if Cambodia doesn't work, we'll bomb Hanoi if we have to.
7.62mm.
And at the end of the day, I struggle to think of a watch in this price range that is as emblematic of American history. I really can't. I mean, unless you can. Speaking from experience, cannot understand how Hamilton make it at this price range. The margins must be minuscule. The value is shockingly good. It encapsulates better than any other watch that I can think of the pragmatism and the bravery of this great nation on its birthday that I so deeply, deeply love. The Khaki Mechanical occupies one of, if not the most important positions in all of watchdom. Instant recognizable iconography, but still affordability from a Swiss heritage brand that also, as my trip to Lancaster back in spring proved, works hard to maintain its American roots. For once, it's not just mendaciously vapid marketing, but an actual tangible red-bricked reality. The heydays of the Seiko SKX seemingly being in every collection, from those consisting of well over 6 figures in total worth to more tasteful, humble lineups costing maybe $1,000 or less, is sadly over. Today, there's very few watches that transverse these polar opposite worlds of value. Maybe G-Shock being the only other beloved true icon accepted by the deep-pocketed, trust-funded collectors, and at the same time also adored by enthusiasts, by real enthusiasts like us, on a budget, who actually have to work our arse off for a living. It's the all-important gateway drug into serious Swiss mechanical horology, and most crucially of all, if you wanted it to be the last watch you'll ever own, or the only watch you'll ever need, it can do both too. The rare exception that flows upstream against the increasing proletarian drift. There's sometimes a danger with military-inspired watches that it becomes like a fiberglass facade of a Disneyland-styled cosplay, an insulting cartoonification of the blood and guts-soaked horrors packaged into consumerist accessories for profit, and thus trivializing the deadly serious sacrifice of real human beings. This, thankfully, doesn't feel like that, but the exact opposite, as it would have been almost more insulting if they hadn't put this watch out. Especially when you consider the antecedents of wrist-worn watches were born from the conflict of World War I trench warfare, where wasting time reaching for a pocket watch might risk getting your head blown off compared to a quick flick of the wrist. There's a real sense of equanimity in a simple, honest, respectable watch, especially in today's world of overstimulation. It's ironic that this puritanical martial utilitarianism has thus become romantic as a result. But this is due to the current horological landscape being dominated by abominations named after fruit. And so therefore, the daily winding becomes a ritualistic pleasure, a confirmation of personal discipline, and a reaffirmation of valuing one's precious finite time, disconnected from the perfidiously demonic online matrix of disinformation, planned obsolescence for profit, and the Orwellian tracking of your vitals. This is a tool that, along with a blade, maybe some rope, and a backbone, it's all you ever really need to survive anything. Its understated machismo makes you feel more like MacGyver than the Expendables. And for those larger-wristed, but undersized between the legs, who predictably will say in the comments, "Oh, it's too small to be a real man's watch," don't forget the hundreds of thousands worn in the heart of darkness deep in Vietnam that were even smaller. The khaki wearer is confident and self-reliant, not needing to flex vulgar ostentation, and there's an inherent Americana coolness to that purity of purpose. It's like Steve McQueen in his roaring Mustang. Even if his was a Benrus, it could have easily been a Hemi. Its commitment to tell time is as serious as the stoic squint of Clint Eastwood in the face of any adversity. It symbolizes that great American yearning for freedom, the same spirit that allowed the likes of Jimi Hendrix to shine, Elvis to take the rock and roll crown, and Ali to sting like a bee, or George Washington to battle on to lay those historic foundations, followed ever since. Now, produced only for 2026, it makes business sense. The previous numbered release, to me, I'm a little bit confused about that. That felt, to be honest, a little bit cash grabby. Maybe they didn't expect it to be so successful and then they wanted to open it up to more people. Again, when you do that later, it kind of devalues the initial limited release. Not perfect, but a very strong and important release, definitely. Pure class or too little too late? What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments, please. I love hearing your feedback. It's the most important aspect, actually, of these videos, interacting with you guys. If I hadn't bought the GS, I would have definitely bought this. It's a no-brainer. And that actually is one of my favorite American expressions. All right, guys, I'm going to leave it there. Don't forget to like this video, especially if you want to support free and truly independent content from a non-watch dealer. I'll catch you in the next one. Onwards and upwards. Thank you for watching. Ciao.